How do we land a big guest on our show? Whether that's a podcast or a YouTube channel, how do we, number one, even get access to these people, let alone get them to say yes to spending time with us? Whether you are a big creator or a small creator, it doesn't matter. It is possible. And I want to share with you a number of tips and strategies that I've learned now having podcasted for over a decade in interviewing people like Michael Hyatt and Tim Ferriss, Gary Vaynerchuk, Amy Porterfield, Chalene Johnson. And no, it just doesn't mean you need to be friends with them. There are a lot of things that we can do to get access to these bigger players, these influencers, these leaders in our space. And we're going to talk about why that's important. And of course, we're going to talk about how to do that. Welcome to the income stream today. Thanks for being here. Make sure you stick around. We're going to have a lot of fun. Here we go.
This is the income stream to help you achieve your dream. All while we keep it clean. This is the income stream. It's the kind of show where you can come and go, but then you leave inspired with no fee required. The income stream with Flynn.
All right, welcome in everybody. Thank you so much for joining me live today. We got Chris in the house, Nurse Flipper, what's up? Good to see you here. The Swedish car guy, yay! Nomadables, Bernard, Carlos Tacos, Ryan, Chris, everybody's here, and I love it. You make me so happy that we could start the day like this together. This was by popular request, as well as last night, I was in a Clubhouse room with Lewis House and Michael Stelzner. And if you don't know what Clubhouse is, it is another one of those brand new social media platforms that has just come about. And I don't say this very often with relation to these things. And I'm usually a late adopter, but I'm really excited about what Clubhouse is and the experience that I had last night. So just a really quick thing. Lewis House created a room within Clubhouse yesterday. He invited me to it. He updated me to be moderator of this room. And these rooms within this platform are sort of like real rooms that you can imagine being with people on, with a stage. And moderators are on the stage, the people in the room are in the audience, and it's voice only, which was really neat. It was really cool to have sort of a podcast-like live experience, but with voice only, no video, and people asking questions. And I was able to go in and talk about podcasting last night. And it was actually a really fun experience, a really cool way to connect. And so I hesitate to say this, but I think that it may be worth downloading the app. It is free, and grabbing your username just in case, right? Both Lewis House, Michael Stelzner, and I are sort of exploring it. I'm not committing to it, but it is something that is really neat. And you can create any room that you'd like, and people can find you organically, and you can start leading these conversations and engaging with people. So again, it's called Clubhouse, and it would be something worth looking into. I've been really enjoying the experience. You know, I haven't really gotten this excited about a new social media platform in a while, but at the same time, it could be one of those things that could end up being a distraction or not necessarily panning out. But as I've once heard from Gary Vaynerchuk, you know, it's always good to explore, but just do it in a controlled manner. Don't go crazy, right? Get a bowl, put your chips in it, and eat the chips from the bowl. Don't just get the whole bag and start crunching away, and then all of a sudden you realize that you ate the whole bag, you're not feeling so good, and then you forgot to do other things, right? So that's kind of the analogy I like to use. And so Clubhouse is the name of the app. You can find me there and follow me there at Pat Flynn. And yeah, it kind of sounds like a Discord, actually, a Baron Art says, but definitely something worth getting into. And the reason why I'm sharing this story is because last night I was asked to speak about podcasting, and a question came up about, well, how do I get a big name on my show, on my podcast? And I wanted to share and relay a lot of that information with you today. And this is something I've talked about before. I've talked about it in my podcasting course, but I wanted to surface this for you because as we go into 2021, you might have some goals, as we've talked about earlier this week, with relation to growing your audience and growing your podcast, growing your YouTube channel, and connecting with big influencers, with leaders in your space, with authority members in your niche is a great strategy to grow. It can help you grow for a number of different reasons. Number one, it can definitely help you grow because of just that association with that name. I think about people specifically like John Lee Dumas, the founder of Entrepreneurs on Fire. He was on fire so much that he did a interview with a entrepreneur every day of the week. It was a 7-day a week show, which was pretty crazy. And the cool thing about this is, as a result of interviewing entrepreneurs daily for years, he has, thousands of different episodes. But in addition to that, he had been able to, number one, just associate with himself with all these huge names. And as a result, John started to have a lot of authority as well. John Lee, it's weird to just call him John. It's literally John Lee Dumas. It's like, we always have to say that. I always have to do the same thing with Lewis House. Even my wife called me out on that. She was like, you mentioned everybody like Chris and Caleb and all your friends, but whenever you talk about Lewis, you say Lewis House. And it's just, I don't know, that's just become his personal brand. It's really interesting. Anyway, getting a big name on your show can help you just grow through association. Oh, you get access to this person? Great. Well, you must have some authority as well. So that would be benefit number one. Benefit number two is when you have a conversation with somebody, you can't help but potentially build a relationship with them, right? And I remember when I got Tim Ferriss on my show in episode 51, this was the first time I ever spoke to him. And he and I have stayed connected ever since, just through text messages. Same thing with Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk and I have gotten to know each other. We're both on the board of advisors for Pencils of Promise and other things. And sort of I was in his book as a result. I mean, a lot of cool things happen. You can build a relationship with a person that you're on a podcast with. And if it so happens to be a big name, that could obviously be of benefit to you. Now, don't do this just to benefit from, like, these two first benefits that I talked about seem very selfish, right? Like, oh, I want to bring a big name on the show because of me. I want to grow because I want this relationship. And yes, that is a byproduct of it. But ultimately, you need to bring these people on because they also serve your audience. They have some experience, they have some motivation, inspiration to share to your audience, no matter how big or small. That's really important too, for example, right? So I think that's really important. Is Clubhouse allowing usernames for brands or only people? I don't know. I don't know, to be honest. But I would recommend being a person there, and then in your bio having your company, if that makes sense. And of course, it's the voice that shows up, and people's names are what people connect with, right? So that would be my recommendation there. Another benefit, potentially, to having a big name on your show is the idea that, hey, they might actually show your episode to their audience as well. I will say, and I'm just going to share this up front, it's not as common as you might think. And maybe when you think about this, you can sort of realize that this is true, where a lot of these people who are bigger names, who are very busy, they either don't have the time, or if they were to do it for you, they'd have to do it for everybody, and it would just mess up their feeds. It's very, very, I would say the chances are maybe 20%, which is still high, 15 to 20%, that if you get a big name, much bigger than you, on your show, the chances of them sharing it, 9 times out of 10, they won't. So I keep making the percentage lower. It's not a high percentage. I wouldn't do it again expecting to grow. And actually, we talked about this yesterday. Lewis House had Kevin Hart on his podcast, and he expected that this was going to go big and go viral. And it did. It actually hit the front page of iTunes and Apple, which was really neat. And it was something that, first of all, he's been working on trying to happen for years. And we'll talk about, again, the how to get big names on your show in just a minute. But it actually didn't get him a lot of traffic compared to some other episodes. And Kevin Hart didn't share it. And you can't, again, expect that to happen. I think if that does happen, it's a bonus, right? If it does happen, it's a bonus. We got Charles in the house, Dil Nawaz, Marshall, or Marital Bodies TV, Ryan, Gabriella, Spanish and Go, Bernard, Grandma Goody. Welcome in, everybody. Thanks for being here. Today, we're talking about landing big guests on your podcast or on your video channel. And we just went over the benefits of doing that. Of course, a benefit is just gaining more knowledge. And, if you're a curious interviewer, which you should be, you're going to unlock new discoveries. You're going to learn about things in ways that can help you and your audience at the same time. So those are the sort of 4 key benefits. Growing through association with these people. Number 2, the potential to build a relationship with them. Number 3, the potential for them to share this information and your show with others to grow your audience. And number 4, just more knowledge, more access to people who have obviously succeeded in one way or another, or who have gone deep with something that you have not, and relaying that information to your audience. It's always going to be with benefit to your audience, hopefully. Don't do this just for you, do it for your audience. But let's talk about the how, right? My number 1 strategy for landing a big guest is this is always going to work better than anything else. And that is to start with an introduction. If you so happen to, obviously, if you already have a relationship, right? If you already have a relationship with this person, you want to start there, right? But if the relationship is more on the fringe and you don't necessarily have a direct contact with them, you might want to find somebody who you do know who may know that person, right? And so if that's the case, and again, you could not have any of those, and we'll continue on with other ways and means to connect with the big A-lister. But if you do have a direct relationship or a sort of second tier or even third tier relationship, this would be the time to ask for a favor and ask for an introduction, right? Now, secondly, a great way to understand how to bring a guest on your show is to understand, well, what could you provide to them, right? Always come from a place of service. And one of my favorite strategies to do this that I'd love to share with you is to consider who might be coming out with a book soon, right? People who write books are typically leaders in their space. People who come out with books are more likely to say yes, because they're going to be in a blitzkrieg situation where they're going to say yes to as many things as possible to get their name out there too. In addition to that, you might be able to support them by saying, you know, I'm going to buy some of your books and give them away to my audience. And of course, if you can share or showcase how well your audience responds to whenever you share to do something, that can obviously help too. So think about the user, the person, the guest who's coming on the show, and consider what can you do for them and what's hot on their list right now. How can you and your audience, your podcast, your YouTube channel support them during that time? And this is exactly how I was able to get, this is on the Smart Passive Income podcast, by the way, how I was able to get Tim Ferriss. He was coming out with the 4-Hour Chef at the time that episode 51 came out. So I reached out to him. It was through a connection with somebody who knew him. So it was sort of a double banger there, right? Not only was I able to get an introduction, but I was able to show that I could help support him in his book. I think I bought like 20 copies that I was going to give away. And I also obviously told him that, you know, we'd bring him on the show and pour as many people into his book as possible. And of course, he was more likely to say yes during this time, and thankfully he did. If you go back and listen to that episode again, that's episode 51. I did fanboy a little bit at the beginning of that episode. That's definitely something you have to worry about. I was a little bit too like, oh my gosh, Tim Ferriss is in the house, and oh my gosh, you've done so much for me. Your book was so instrumental, and like I think it's okay to do that a little bit. It shows realism. It shows like that you're actually a fan of this person, but at the same time, you don't want to do it for like 8 minutes like I did, and then finally get into the stuff that people want to hear about. So just something to keep in mind. But again, this interview with Tim Ferriss, episode 51, was a result of me wanting to support his book. Obviously, I knew that was on his mind. I was a follower of his. He had been talking about it for a while, and I bought some books. And as a result of that, we became friends. Actually, he knew that I was a podcaster person, and he wanted to start his podcast. I don't know if you know this, but I actually helped him launch his podcast. I didn't like do all the things for him, but I definitely helped him and consulted him during that time. And now his podcast has been doing really well. He wanted to repay me in a way where he said, a lot of my audience is going to want to know, hey, yo, thank you so much for that. Bill, thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. I appreciate you. Sean McCann in the house. Uncle Bill in the house. Conrad in the house. Love it. Dawn, welcome in. With the Tim Ferriss episode, he then later asked me to film a video that he would pop onto his channel. And if I were to go to YouTube here, I haven't checked this out in a while, but this just shows you the power of connection. Even when you're considered a nobody to somebody because we're so small and they're so big, if you have some knowledge that can help them, because here's what happened. He came on the episode. I then learned that he was going to start a podcast. And then I reached out to him later and said, hey, how can I help you with that? And we started talking. And of course, I provided him value. And it doesn't mean, like, you can provide value no matter who you are. You just need to know what a person needs help with and how you might be able to help. But if I were to go to YouTube, for example, you can see what I'm involved with, right? Pokemon cards, the Starship launches, and Elon Musk. Anyway, if I go to Tim Ferriss Podcasting GarageBand, you'll see a video with me. Look at that, 4 years ago. And look at that, that's my picture up on there. That is insane. How to use GarageBand for podcasting with Pat Flynn. So he literally was just like, just shoot me a video for my audience and I'll put it on my YouTube channel. And he did. And that has helped me get introduced to so many new people, which was pretty cool. So I absolutely love that. Pat, I appreciate you. Thanks for all your great content and honest information. Thank you, Baron Art, and everybody who's here to learn how to get big guests on your show. So how did I get Gary Vaynerchuk on the show? His book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, came out. And as a result of that, he came on the podcast in episode 213 and in a couple other episodes actually after that. So Jab, 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 Right Hook was coming out. I knew that this was going to happen. I reached out to not him, but to somebody who I knew was his right-hand man. And this is lesson number 3, I guess. Or I don't even know what lesson we're on, but we're just kind of brainstorming and I'm brain dumping for you what is working, right? So here is one thing that works. Knowing that the person who you are likely wanting to get on your show is not the person that's actually booking the things, right? And Gary being a very busy guy, I knew that he had people under him who were likely the decision makers, who I could better interact with to potentially make this happen. So I found out who that was. I looked on LinkedIn, I asked around, I found out who the decision makers were, who Gary's team was, and I reached out to them and said and presented to them in the same way. Thank you, Nomadables, so much for the super chat. I appreciate you. It was something that I knew would work better than just kind of tagging Gary all the time, right? And potentially having that work. So that worked too. Figuring out who the decision makers are, who are their assistants, getting in good with them, building a relationship with them, and then presenting what you could offer for them in exchange. And then it was able to happen. And then I remember finding out that Gary's right-hand man was like, okay, Pat, we got him for you, but you only got 15 minutes. And I was like, 15 minutes? My show's like 45 minutes. And he's like, okay, but you have 15 minutes. That's literally all we have. And I was like, okay, cool, we'll do it. I was actually able to record that interview on video, and the thumbnail today was actually a screenshot of that conversation, the very first time I spoke to Gary and how I was able to get him on the show. The Joe Mobley Show, welcome to Team Flynn Gold, my friend. Thank you so much for the chat. I appreciate you, and thankful for all the members here who are helping support the channel. And this month, all that super chat income, all the membership income is going to support teachers here as we finish up the year, because teachers need recognition, they need help, they need support, and I'm here to support them too. So thank you for that. I appreciate you. Lex in the house. What's up, Lex? Nordic Hunter. Lewis. Great. Excuse me. Gassy. All right. So let's continue to talk about how to potentially get an A-lister, a big name, a leader on your show. Yo, there it is, right there. I guess I don't have to do that manually. It happens automatically. Anyway, it takes a second for it to go to space and come back, and then I see it. So anyway, thank you again. All right, so let's keep going. What else works to get an A-lister on your show? So we talked about, checking to see if they're writing a book. Actually, that's the strategy I wanted to talk about. So let me see if I can do this on the fly here. So Amazon Books, business. I'm just going to see if I can find the business category here. Now, what I want to do is I want to filter this. I want to show coming soon. This is how we can figure out who is coming out with a book soon. So Lewis Howes talked about a strategy yesterday inside of Clubhouse, basically saying that, just reach out to publishers and reach out to publicists to see who's coming out with a book in the next, 3 to 6 months, and you'd be able to see that. A lot of times, especially those who have bigger names, they'll be able to get access to putting their book on Amazon for pre-sale. So if you could find out which books are coming out for pre-sale, you're going to obviously find out who's coming out with a book soon. And you can use that knowledge to then reach out to them to say, hey, I see you have a book coming out soon. Might I be able to support you with that? I'd love to have you on the show. And you can book these people early, right? Because these people are going to get very busy during this time. So if you can book early, that's going to work out for you, right? So at least it comes back, says Stephanie, right? Okay, so I'm going to click coming soon. And now I see that Donald Miller, the author of Story Brand, is going to come out with a book in January of 2021. So this may be a little bit too late, but still 2 months out, or a month out. Donald Miller, one of my favorite authors, is building a Story Brand book. He was actually on the podcast already, so I've already had access to Donald, and I'm sure that if I wanted to bring him on the show again to support his book, he would say yes. But if I go down here, let's see, I can just look Bill Gates. Hey, Bill, I see you have a podcast coming out. Bill might be a very, very sort of large person to potentially get on the show, but hey, you never know. What's the worst? Here's the other thing about this. A lot of the stuff that happens with booking a big guest happens up here, right? Up here. up here, right? And sometimes we need to just slap ourselves out of it and get back to reality and understand that, hey, we can still be of service to these big names, and that the only thing that's really going to get in the way of potentially having this happen is ourselves, right? So we need to understand that, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Well, Bill Gates might say no, or he might not respond, and that's fine. But knowing that we're ahead, this person or somebody who works for them, understanding that we're proactively seeking to help them before other people, can be of great service to them and can help us be more likely to get access to this, right? Coming down here, John C. Maxwell, January. We got, let's see here, investing for kids. That could be really interesting. Everybody has a podcast except you, from Justin McElroy. What a great name. Knowing Yourself, Rachel Cruz. So she is, I think, the daughter of Dave Ramsey. This coming out in January. A lot of books in January. I'm wondering if I could filter this for, like, date. Sort by publication date. Yes, I can. Thank you, Amazon. So March 10. A lot of these, you got to be careful. I would do further research. You don't just want to go down the list here. There's a lot of people who, you might not want to get in front of your audience, or just might not make any sense. Sometimes when you click on the author's name, you'd be able to also see. Sometimes if the author's name is clickable, that could be somebody who you could tell has some interest and has a following and whatnot. Oftentimes on these author pages, you'll also be able to see sort of their feed or follow them. In this case, I don't see their social media accounts. Spanish and Go says, I love what Spanish and Go here said, and this is in relation to what I said about just kind of getting out of your own way and trying. We've invited CEOs of companies on the podcast this year just to see what would happen, and have often been surprised to get an answer. And that's great. That's absolutely great. Hold on one sec. Cool. All right. So that's a strategy, seeing who has books coming out soon. If you see or have heard that a person in your space is coming out with a new product line, maybe you follow them on social media and you see that they're coming out with a new thing, a new product, a new software, a new course or coaching program, they're going to be more likely to say yes during that time. So keep that in mind. But at the same time, the likelihood that they're going to share that out is going to be less, because, again, they're going to have to either say yes to everybody or do it for nobody. It's going to be very unlikely that they're going to share your stuff during these times. But again, this is how you can get access, right? This is how you can get access. All right, let's keep going here. Let's keep continuing to talk about how might we be able to get access to people. One of the strategies that I learned comes from a man named Brian Harris from videofruit.com. A very smart man. I've gotten to know him very well over the last number of years. He's very influential in how we've built our email marketing challenge. He was the one who sort of discovered this sort of more one-on-one approach to building your email list first before you scale up. You can find that challenge at 100emails.com, and definitely credit to Brian Harris for sort of the inspiration and initial thoughts about that. Brian had coined this term called the, what did he call it? It was like the teacher's pet strategy, right? Where you become a star student. And when you become a star student of somebody, let's say that you have an influencer who you follow, somebody who teaches online courses or coaches, and you follow their work and you study them and you do their work. If you can show how your work has been influenced by them, how your success has come about from them, they're going to be more likely to at least start paying attention to you, right? Because you are, number one of their students, but number two, not just any student, but somebody who has taken action, somebody who has gotten results. So this gets you in the door. And for Brian, this works in the other way, where this allows him to get on other people's stages, on other people's podcasts, right? So he did this with Noah Kagan. He was very helpful and a star student in that community, and then was featured on Noah Kagan at OK Dork's website and sales page, and Brian Harris was able to grow as a result of that. So that kind of worked in the opposite way, you being a guest on another show. But I can see this working in the opposite direction. And this kind of worked in my case with Ramit Sethi. I'm somebody who has followed Ramit Sethi for a very long period of time now. I would consider a student of his, not going for the small little savings here, but going for the big wins in life, the big wins in savings. and I've purchased some of his courses as well. So actually I am a student of his, and have paid quite a bit of money. And that has definitely got me in the door, because when I share how he's influenced my life and how much success I've had as a result of him, he's more likely to have a conversation with me, number one. And it's more likely to be the case that he would then come on my show, because he would want to also teach people like me, because smart people know that when you help one person, that one person can also help feed more people coming into the system too. So that can help too, right? So the idea of becoming the poster boy formula is what he called it. That's the word I was looking for. The poster boy formula, right? So that's another strategy that can help you get your foot in the door. Another thing is to potentially participate in things this person is also participating in first, and taking a more longer term approach, right? This idea that maybe the person that you're following or that you want on the show is also a huge Lego fan, right? And they also go to Lego events, and you can start to have a connection with their first before you start just kind of cold asking for them to come on your show. It is more likely, and I think this would be the case for you as well, when you happen to be doing something similar to somebody else and you happen to have the same likes and same interests, you're more likely to start and engage in a conversation and want to help each other out, no matter what the size of our audiences are. We just so happen to both, I don't know, be fans of the Golden Bears, or be Lego fans, or both be into Pokemon and whatnot, right? So we have that common ground, and we can start conversation there, and potentially then turn that into something where, hey, well, I'd love for you to be a guest on the show, for example, right? So that can make sense too. Peter Birch here says, I had success I had success a competition on LinkedIn asking people to guess which guest is on next, then tag 4 high-profile guests, then contact the highest voted and say listeners want them on. Nice, Peter. I like that sort of more strategic approach to that. I think having guests on your show, consider, well, who might be a good fit? Like if you interview somebody who's maybe mid-level, who then might know somebody, going through that route could go a very long way for sure, because then you would have built a relationship with that initial guest, and then you could potentially get a referral to the bigger guest, right? So the other thing I'll say before I have my closing remarks here, and then we'll get into Q&A here, because all these things can work. Number one, you need to ask, or else nothing's going to happen. But the final thing I'll share with you is this. You need to be persistent, but not annoying, right? There's a big difference between, following through and being persistent and having, gusto in that manner, but also this idea of just being absolutely annoying. Where, like, it just reminds me, there's whenever Elon Musk texts or tweets something, right? And he tweets quite often. Every time, because I follow Elon Musk on Twitter, every time I see that, I notice that there's a person who's a game developer who literally shares the same message every time after Elon Musk tweets something. And it's, hey, Elon, I'm a game developer. I'd love to include you in a video game that I'm creating. All I need is your blessing. And he literally has like day 45 out of 365 asking you. Day 46, day 47. It's literally every day. And people hate it. It's like, dude, why don't you just create the game and do it? Like, why are you being annoying here? And it's just like, anyway, it just comes across weird, and it's the same message every time, and it's just kind of annoying. So we don't want to be annoying, right? And I want to share with you from my perspective that, number one, it's honestly the people who I say yes to for me coming on their show. I either have a relationship with them already, they are perhaps a student of mine, they are somebody who I was introduced to, they've told a good story, they haven't wasted my time, they are somebody who perhaps reaches out via a video versus just a text. They call me by name. Gosh, I got to tell you, as a creator who I know a lot of people want me on their show, when people start their email saying, "Dear host of Smart Passive Income," I'm just like, no, you're out, right? I don't even read those things anymore. Also, the other thing that we can talk about that's really interesting before I have my big final point here is the fact that there are companies out there like Interview Valet that can help you get access to people to interview. However, I have a love-hate relationship with these companies, right? Clockwork Junkie Podcast says, "Hey, Pat, love your advice. Past 50 podcast milestone this week." Yo, that is awesome. High five. That's excellent. Well done. Well done. That guy sounds like a groupie. Yeah. Chris Tucker on Instagram. Nice. I had 35 notifications this morning about him. So where was I? The idea. I don't even remember where I was. If y'all could help me. I was saying, this like generic cookie cutter situation is not good. And then I have a love-hate relationship with these companies like Interview Valet. They're great. I know the people there. They're amazing. They're in it for the right reasons. But I just got to say, as a creator from this end, when I see that a person wants me on their show and they're not the ones asking, I often am like, why not? It's not that hard to just step up and ask yourself, why do you need somebody else to do this for you? Now, I understand that in many cases, we're so busy that we just literally don't have the time, and you're being efficient and smart about your time, and that's cool. But for me personally, I know a number of people who feel the same way. Let me know if you feel the same way. If the person who wants you on their show is not asking you directly, but there's somebody else asking on their behalf, does that take away from the potential of you being on that show? Right? Let me know. So the final point here is I don't want you to discount the fact that there are other people besides A-listers, leaders, influencers in your space that you could bring on your show. And just to give you some perspective, as you know, I've had Tim Ferriss on my podcast, Gary Vaynerchuk, and let's just consider like those two. The first time those two were on the podcast, huge download numbers, right? Big names that just the name itself draws people in, a lot of great information, a lot of inspiration. Well, many of you might not know, but Shane and Jocelyn Sams from episode 122, Shane and Jocelyn Sams were two teachers from Kentucky. Most people have never heard of them before. That episode 122, has more downloads than Tim Ferriss and Gary Vaynerchuk combined. So you add up those download numbers from Tim Ferriss and Gary Vaynerchuk, that doesn't have as many downloads as when Shane and Jocelyn Sams were on the podcast. Why? Because Shane and Jocelyn Sams were in fact listeners of the podcast. They are in fact members of the audience. People that the audience could relate to more. And yes, it's great to have A-listers on your show and these people who are in the stratosphere of your space. But too often, we think that that's all that could serve our audience. But we have to think about it from the audience's perspective. Sometimes the advice that Tim Ferriss gives is way out there and not even a possibility. Sometimes the advice that Gary Vaynerchuk offers is a little bit too maybe over the top or not of the style that my audience could resonate with. But Shane and Jocelyn Sams, two humble teachers, one, Shane, who was on a lawnmower when he first heard of Smart Passive Income, stopped mid-mow to go tell his wife, Jocelyn, that they were going to succeed in online business following Pat Flynn, and she, thinking I was like a crazy person and that her husband was insane, and then building a multi-million-dollar business, that's inspirational. That is something that people can relate to. They feel like they're just a few steps ahead versus somebody who is way out there who they could never get to, right? So yes, A-listers are great. As Chris here says, this was great. It does make sense though. While A-listers are interesting, most people have a good idea of what they are going to talk about. Yes. But when you hear a story of somebody just like you and you're a listener to a podcast, you can't help but get incredibly inspired. You can't help but think that things could happen for you too. And you can't help but want to connect with the community even more and realize that you're a part of something special, right? Because that's a member just like you. And if you want to talk about money, I mean, episode 275 of the Smart Passive Income podcast, let me see if I can pull that up. Just Gary Vaynerchuk on the podcast. If I just do 275, will that work? Yes. Wow. I love the search on Smart Passive Income. So this was a podcast episode where I invited 3 beta students from my podcasting course to come on the show. This podcast episode came out the same week that the course was launched publicly for the first time, my Power Up Podcasting course. In this episode, I invited 3 beta students, 3 different types of people from different age groups, from different business types, and I interviewed them. But I didn't interview them to say, hey, tell me how awesome my course was and what's life for you like now. That's not how you want to position it. I interviewed my own students and I asked them questions like, why did you want to start a podcast in the first place? Why was this so important for you? What was holding you back before? What were the challenges and the obstacles that you were trying to overcome that you just didn't do initially? And what's life like now on the other end? And what are you doing now? And for example, the story of Grandma B, or not Grandma B, Dr. B, excuse me. She's over 60 years old. She started a podcast, deathly afraid of technology, didn't think that this was possible. She was able to create a podcast to help people deal with ADHD. And when I asked her, what's life like now? She's like, this is the most fun I've ever had. And she now has a map behind her computer where every time she gets a published podcast in a new country, she sees it because you can see geographically where people are listening. And she puts a pin on a map in front of her computer. And she's just incredibly excited about the fact that she's able to help people now. So through these interviews, without even asking for it, these people, each of them said, oh my gosh, Pat, it was your course. Well, in your course, you talk about it this way. Pat, you made it so easy for me, even though I'm over 60 and I'm scared of technology. You showed me exactly how to do it. So a person who's thinking about getting my course is hearing a person who just took it, who is just like them, who has the same exact objections. Can you see how powerful this is? How incredibly powerful your podcast can be without A-listers. You don't need industry leaders. You don't need the big celebrities on your show in order for it to do some amazing things for you, and more importantly, amazing things for your audience too, right? Her podcast is Living Beyond ADHD. Living Beyond ADHD. So yeah. Woo! Good stuff, right? So I hope this all makes sense to you. Yes, celebrities are great for all the reasons we talked about. But at the same time, if you can't get celebrities on your show, well, now you have more room for inspirational stories from your own. So let's keep that in mind. Loving this, Pat, says my thank you. Quite often, my most listened episodes are the ones with a great story, not the ones with a guest who got a big audience, says Jeremy. See? I'm not just the only one. I'm not just the only one. Agreed. Many people simply need ideas and putting those ideas into action. Okay, here's the comment from Jeremy. Thank you, Jeremy. And thank you to everybody who's here. Thanks for that. What's up, Austin Mom? Austin Mom, good to see you here. So let's talk about what you have questions about. I'd love to spend the next 20 minutes with you considering, okay, we just talked about getting A-listers on your show as well as the power of people who are in your own audience. I would highly recommend inviting your students and in a very Donald Miller story brand-like manner, feature them on your show. The other thing I'll say is, what about B-listers and C-listers, if you want to call them that, right? Brand new podcasters who are probably more excited to be in this space and would be A, more likely to say yes, and B, be stoked to be on your show and probably are going to have good audio quality too, right? So check out the new and noteworthy in the categories that you're in. Who knows? The episodes where you invite this person on, you might find a diamond in the rough, somebody who's going to explode and go big, and you were one of their first people to invite them on the show, and you were able to get access to them now before you can't later, right? Find out who the up-and-comers are who are starting podcasts. They're going to be more likely to say yes. They're going to be able to sort of share with you, and you might be able to collaborate with them. Sorry, I was like burping at the same time. You might be able to collaborate with them. Hey, I'd love to invite you on my show, and I'd be happy to be on your show too. And you can actually grow together. I keep hitting this microphone. You never cease to inspire. Thank you, Dylan Nawaz. I think you had asked a question earlier about podcasting, Dylan Nawaz. If you can re-ask that. I saw it come through, but I wasn't able to answer it at the time. If you could ask that again, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Only authors want to tell me their stories, not the average person. I think the average person has more of a boundary before or is a little bit more reluctant to tell their story. Your job as the interviewer is to tell the story. When they have A, permission, and B, you've set it up and made it feel comfortable for them. I mean, some of the people who aren't authors have told the best stories because you help shape it. Your role as interviewer is to guide them, right? Is to guide them. So question number one, live podcast versus recorded podcast, pros and cons. So let's talk about that. So live podcast would be, for example, if I were to bring a guest on the show here today and you saw a split screen and I was recording that, having a live audience is kind of cool. It's almost like a behind the scenes. I could take that live podcast and repurpose the audio and put it into a pre-recorded podcast or just a feed on Apple and Spotify and Stitcher and Google, right? So that it can be both, right? And I think if you had the ability to give people access to this early, maybe it's just for members only, for example, that they can actually get these interviews. It also can hold you accountable to showing up and making sure that you're not only providing value to the listener on the other end in a pre-recorded, but also live. The worry is that if you interact with the live audience, the people who listen later are going to feel like they're left out. This, on one hand, could encourage them to want to come and become a member or check out your YouTube so that you can sort of give them this ahead of time and they could see it live and maybe even have access to Q&A after in a live setting. But at the same time, for example, if you were like, hey, welcome, Joan. Hey, Chris. Hey, Bill, great to see you here. Thanks. If people are listening to that later, it's less effective versus, hey, listener, thank you for so much for being here today. Today, I want to talk to you about getting big guests on your podcast. I know you have a podcast, but I don't quite know if you get the number one strategy, whatever, right? It's more personal. So you could potentially take that away by having a live recording of your podcast. So that's sort of number one, if that makes sense. Let's go to question number 2 here. Video versus audio podcast. Again, very same thing. If you're showing things that are worthy of a video, then it won't be as effective on the audio. But if you go the other way around, audio, having it be popped on video is a struggle as well. Because, well, what's going to visually keep people watching on YouTube? It could actually work against you to have a video podcast that's full length because people aren't here to watch a face the entire time unless they're already fans of yours. What I do think works, however, is taking clips from your show, whether you record it video or not. You can take the audio and pop it onto a short video as well, maybe 5 minutes about a very particular topic instead of just guest name here. And you can have it be foundable or findable on search. You can have it be something that, like a funnel, like a conical shape, can bring people in from that video and then take them into your more longer episode on your audio podcast. You can go that way too. Big people versus people with diverse perspective, both are important. Q4, hosting your own website versus Anchor, or third party too. I would host your podcast on a third party tool built specifically for podcasts and on one that has a small payment required. Anchor is fine. If you literally have no money to spend, Anchor can work for you, but I hesitate for Anchor for a couple of reasons. Number one, because it's a free platform, we've all seen what has happened with free platforms that we've gone on before. They're going to eventually need to pay back or pay to money to investors, and then they start making decisions that aren't smart for the user. It's smart for the investor, and that's not good for us. We've seen this on Facebook, Instagram, even here on YouTube, for example. So I think you know what I mean. Number two, because it's free, most people who have an Anchor podcast do not keep up with it. There is no skin in the game. There's no fault to quitting. There's no consequence to quitting if it's free. But if you have some skin in the game, even with something like Buzzsprout, and I would highly recommend Buzzsprout, smartpassiveincome.com/Buzzsprout as a host. I'm an affiliate. That is my affiliate link. I get paid if you go through that, but you also get some extra time on your account. So smartpassiveincome.com/Buzzsprout. You own it and it's yours, and there's support there. And it is something that, they're very involved in the podcasting space, and they have a ton of tools that can help you too, right? So great question. Thank you. Rob had a question as well, I think. Pat, guest releases. Do you have your guest sign a release? You can do it a couple ways. It depends on your level of comfort. You can have people sign a guest. In our podcasting course, we actually do have a templated guest release form that you can have people sign, and you can do it in a very simple way using like a DocuSign or HelloSign or something, so it's just easier. But number two, some people go as far as having, and this is where I lie, is on the recording itself and or through the email process to have people agree to, if they were to do the podcast, they agree to the terms that we'd be able to use this on the podcast and we might repurpose and use it elsewhere, right? So again, it's up to you. I would recommend speaking to a professional or a lawyer or an attorney on your end that knows your brand and your situation specifically. Most podcasters don't do guest release forms. Every time I've been on a show, I've never had anybody ask me, and I don't want to be like, you kind of need my permission to use this, but by saying yes to the podcast, that is kind of permission. So it's kind of a gray area, but I think that works too. Mobley says, but I went with Podbean. Podbean's great too. Podbean's great as well. All right. Question from who? Sorry. I'm just kind of scrolling. From Pez of Uprising, how often or should you have a guest on your show on your podcast? It's going to be up to you. I once thought that I was going to only do a solo show, and then all of a sudden realized that there were so many more people out there that I could connect with, and then, of course, all the benefits that I mentioned of having a guest on the show, celebrity or not, it can be very impactful. So I would highly recommend, even if you have a solo show, every once in a while having a guest on. Amy Porterfield takes that approach where it is a solo show. However, every once in a while, she brings an expert on about something. I came on to talk about affiliate marketing one time, when it makes sense. It's not like one guest per month or one guest every other week. It's just whenever it makes sense. And that's kind of the approach that I would recommend taking. And that's kind of the approach that I take, but on the opposite side. I do a guest interview. However, every once in a while, I will come in and do a solo show when it makes sense because I'm the subject matter expert there. You will see a change, however. I will say this, you're going to be the first to know. You will be the first to know that there will be a change in the SPI podcast next year as far as within this realm of guests versus not having guests. That's all I'm going to say about that, but you're going to see something interesting happen within our feed. And I'm really excited because it means just more help for you and more service to you. And that's what I'm really excited about, right? Cynthia, where am I hosting podcasts on my site? So we have to define this a little bit, right? So hosting your audio files is one thing. That means taking the MP3 files that you edit with your guest or whatever that you've already put through GarageBand or Audacity. You've edited the show, right? You have an MP3. You can double click on it and listen to your show. That's great. You want to take that MP3 and put it into a podcast hosting company. This is a company like Buzzsprout that can serve your MP3 files and host them, right? So anytime anybody calls your podcast from Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever, it's pulling from this host, Buzzsprout, and then serving them that audio, right? And that's kind of how podcasting works. It's not a uploading to Apple, separate, uploading to Google, separate, uploading to Spotify. That's not how it works. You upload it to the one place, the host, and all you need to do is one time and one time only give Apple and Spotify and Google the RSS feed that host gives you. Because that RSS feed will update automatically. And then if these directories already have your RSS feed, every time you come out with a new episode and you upload it into your host, it literally like gets shot out into the world and anybody who's subscribed, and it will show up on those directories automatically. So that's the beauty of this. Once you're set up, now you just have to create content and upload to your host. But on your website, that's a separate story. Technically, you don't need a website to have a podcast. You could just have the host and that's it. But your website is great because it can support your podcast in a couple of ways. Number one, you can have an area on your website for where your podcast is. So it's just there and people could subscribe to it. You can include players from your host on your website and individual blog posts that have every individual episode housed on them with some show notes or helpful links or resources, a player that shows that particular episode. That helps you get found for search engine optimization. Also, people who are just exploring your website and maybe they found a blog post, they then see your podcast and can kind of listen to it there and then subscribe and go out elsewhere too. Yes, Bobby Ann, that would be crazy if we had to upload it everywhere. All right, we have 10 minutes left. I love the questions that are coming in. And this is a nice warm-up because we do have office hours today for students in my courses. You're the man, Pat. Thanks for so much valuable content. I'm here for you, Christopher. Thank you so much. High five. This is so true. As a spoken word artist, I have been asked to appear in other Facebook Live readings just by appearing on other readings. Networking can help share audiences. I love it, Kenny. Thank you. So it's all about the connection you have with your audience as well. Indeed, for sure. Thank you for the super chat earlier. By the way, Nomadables. Conical shape. Yeah, that was a stretch. Tomorrow, we will be choosing a new secret word together. And the secret word this past week, there were two, in fact. One was a bonus, but the main one was fringe. Did y'all catch when I said that today? I think I used it in a pretty good manner today. Yesterday's, I think, was okay, too. There was one where it was just forced, but I think we're okay. And then the other one was conical shape. So we're going to do another word or two tomorrow. If you come tomorrow, Friday is our fun game day where we spin the wheel, we play some games, we have some prizes and giveaways, and I will be choosing a new word of the day for our stream for the next week. All right. Spout. Okay. Yo, Hey Archer, thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. And also, Hey Archer designed our very own Team Flynn merch, which is only available this month and this month only. A lot of you have requested for some merch. We have our very first piece, and it was actually designed by Hey Archer himself. So Hey Archer, thank you so much for the design. You can find that at patflynn.com/merch. And this is the shirt. The Team Flynn shirt. A little surprise on the back for you. And a little shout out to Hey Archer as well. You can check it out. This is only here in December 2020. You can get the shirt here. We do ship internationally. You can get more than one if you'd like. And at the end of December, it'll be done. So we're going to print them afterwards for whoever purchases them. And for those of you who had asked, like, how did I make this sales page? I actually used a tool called Samcart. And my latest pre-recorded video shows you how I built that website in 5 minutes. So you can see how all that's put together too, which is really cool. So thanks, Hey Archer, for the design, and everybody who has already purchased a shirt. I'm excited to see some pictures. How do you keep such a fantastic flow when you talk into the camera like you do, or solo on a podcast? Honestly, practice, man. Practice. Literally. After doing it so many times, after doing anything so many times, you can't help but get better at it. And when you consciously try to get better, meaning you are actually paying attention to what you messed up on and looking for ways to improve, reading about it, putting yourself out there, you can't help but improve. It's just like playing the piano. Like if you play every day for 30 minutes, you're going to improve. Now, obviously there's ways that you can improve more, you can get coaching for it, but it just flows now. It's weird because when I started this journey back in 2008, the reason why I didn't start my podcast until 2010 was because I was so scared of what I was going to say, and I didn't know what I was going to say. I even scripted out things so that I didn't forget. But then I eventually realized that if I was just going to script out everything, I was just basically reading blog posts, and that wasn't actually helping me. Edward, thank you so much for the sticker, by the way. I appreciate you for the super chat and the coffee. Now I'm going to get coffee after this. What does the bottom of my shirt say? Life's better when you make stuff. Like, make great friends, make great content, make great things that serve others, in my opinion. But it just comes from practice, and I still stumble. I still say a lot. I still need some help, and in some cases, especially when it's a topic I don't know much about, I still fumble. But of course, when you are talking about something that you are passionate about, that you're excited about, that you know a lot about, that you've been doing for over a decade, you can't help but be good at talking about it. And of course, when you learn how to tell stories and you've told stories multiple times and you've shared this advice multiple times, you can see what works better, what doesn't. And over time, you can just hone in on those things that actually do work. And as somebody who is not a great communicator before, I hope this inspires you. I hope this inspires you to know that there is so much upside. You just have to put one foot in front of the other, right? All right. I'm practicing daily recording short videos just to get better at dictation and presentation, says John. Wonderful. I love it. Pat, thank you for all you do for us. Question, is video podcast the best way to acknowledge your video podcast? Is video podcast the best way to acknowledge your video podcast? I'm curious about what you mean exactly, Lisa, but I would say that if you have a video podcast, that just basically means you're turning on the camera while recording your podcast. I would say, number one, definitely make sure you have something that's worth visually looking at. Not meaning like how people look, but are there things that maybe pop up on the screen? Are there visuals that pop in every once in a while? If you can have somebody, for example, edit something later and maybe there's B-roll, maybe there's sort of images that pop up, that makes it more interesting and more likely that a person's going to sit and watch all the way through, especially if that stuff is stacked in the beginning of your video podcast. In addition, obviously, whether it's video or audio, making sure you have a really great hook hooks people in and keeps people watching. And of course, a video with a really great hook gets sent out to more people. That's the benefit of having a podcast in video format on YouTube, is you get to take advantage of the algorithm if it should serve you, which it doesn't always. And then the last thing I'll share is that you can take clips from your video podcast and have them be very specific about something searchable. This is how I found out about Joe Rogan's podcast back in the day, was I was looking up something in particular and saw that there was like a 5-minute segment from his 4-hour interview, but I was interested in that segment alone. And then I heard that segment and I was like, wow, I need to listen to the rest of this episode. And then I got sucked in, right? Like many people have. Pat helps me with my public speaking. Stories journal, right? Your bank of stories, your story bank for sure. Dylan Nawaz, thank you so much for the super chat, my friend. I appreciate you for that. Thanks, written on top of a purple heart. Thank you. Slowly but surely getting better. Love it. Practice leading up to speaking opportunity, and watching your talk afterwards will help tremendously. Yeah, for sure. It can be very difficult to watch your own stuff after because it's kind of embarrassing. We never like to listen to our own voice, let alone watch ourselves. But you do pick up on it, the cringy moments, and the good moments too. I think also paying attention to, and this is what I love about the live stream, I can share things and in real time get feedback. I can tell a brand new story and experiment and see how that resonates. I can see if there's not that much reaction or if it actually blows people away. If I start to hear people say, oh my gosh, I'm crying or I'm laughing so hard right now, I remember that and I can write it in my story bank so that the next time I come across the same topic, I can on stage or in a webinar or in a conversation. Sorry, did you hear that? That microphone is like right here. I don't know if you can see my finger, but it's right off of screen. Anyway, yeah. Cool. This has been really fun, guys. I appreciate you for checking me out today and having fun. This is great. This is super fun. I just want to say I appreciate you so much. This has been a really fantastic week. I had a lot of fun on the stream this week. Not that I didn't have fun other weeks, but I got to dig into some old presentations, like the one in 2015 at Vegas where I came on stage in a DeLorean. I brought that presentation back. That was on Tuesday, where we talked about the future, right? And what has been working to keep people and companies surviving through tough times, which obviously we need this information now. So if you haven't checked out that one yet, definitely check out Tuesday's talk about the future. Yesterday, we talked about the past. We told a lot of stories about things that have happened in my life and the lessons learned from them. The big lesson from that is things aren't going to go the way that we want them to, but it's up to us how to react to that situation. Because a lot of times we can't control what happens, but we definitely can control the story that we're creating based on the reactions that we have to those things. And then today, obviously, talking about something more strategic and specific about a particular platform like YouTube and or podcasting, getting a big guest on, but bringing it all around and saying, you know what, you actually don't need big guests to succeed. You just need to tell great stories, take these great stories out of your guest, and if you can put a spotlight on your own people, your own students, those episodes can in fact be more relatable and more downloaded and more inspirational. So tomorrow, again, come back in if you can. We're going to be spinning the wheel. We're going to be giving away some prizes, having some fun, telling more stories. We're going to be playing some games. I owe you one watch your mouth because I failed on Tuesday, I think, to mention the secret word. And then we're going to pick a new secret word tomorrow too. So yeah, there we go. I appreciate you so much. This was a fantastic week. I'm inspired. I'm grateful for you. Thank you so much. If you haven't done so already, hit that thumbs up button. We could potentially, within the next minute, get to 100 thumbs ups. And I hope that this is valuable for you. If you're brand new here, thank you so much. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Plus, ding that bell notification icon so you can get notified when new videos come so you don't miss them, especially with the live videos where you can get direct access to me and get questions answered too. Thank you so much for today. I appreciate you. And my mind is blown that we can continue to, even during this pandemic, connect with each other and serve one another. Network Chuck, thanks for what you do, Pat. You're a big reason why I do what I do. I appreciate you for that, my friend. Thank you so much. Take care. And as always, Team Flynn for the win.
This is the income stream to help you achieve your dream. All while we keep it clean. This is the income stream. It's the kind of show where you can come and go, but then you leave inspired with no fee required. The income stream with that Flynn.
Oh man. Stretch. And stretch. If you've been sitting for a long time, just move around. Take care of yourself. Take care of your body. I'm really excited for now 98 days from now, day 365. It's going to be epic. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you. And as always, Team Flynn for the win. Peace out, y'all.